introduce our next speaker, who is Breda Corish, who's Clinical Reference Director at Elsevier Clinical Solutions.
Great, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and quite glad to be going on after Marjorie, because what I'm going to do now is just give you a very brief overview of some particular developments in Elsevier, specifically focused on the healthcare and medical information market. And I think that is quite a nice illustration of some of the very things that Marjorie was just talking about. Excuse me, and if my voice holds up for the full 10 minutes, we'll be doing well. Some of you may be aware, back in 2012, Elsevier launched Clinical Key, and this was really our new flagship offering for the medical healthcare market, very much targeted to doctors and clinicians. And what we really wanted to do at the time was to basically take all this great content we have and give doctors and clinicians a more powerful tool for getting to the right answer as quickly as possible. And I think if you look at this slide, you can see, we certainly had plenty of content. We also had plenty of products. So that was actually a bit of a challenge to how do we bring all of that together in a systematic way that would still deliver a more powerful and intuitive search experience at the end of the day. And the way we went about doing that was by creating our own proprietary taxonomy called Emmett, the Elsevier Merged Medical Taxonomy. And in doing that, I have to say this was a very, very significant investment for the organisation. What I'm talking about today was the outcome of several years, very significant work across the organisation. A lot of time was spent looking at the many and various taxonomies and coding structures that were out there already. And for a variety of reasons, it was felt actually it made sense to develop our own proprietary taxonomy, where we took the Unified Medical Language System collation of many codes. We used that as the core of what we were doing, but then we wrapped what we would call a custom layer around that. And what it basically meant, what we were able to do was to interrogate an awful lot of the data that we had already. So if you imagine what many of the reference textbooks, the latest developments that are published in our journals or medical dictionaries that we have, we were able to interrogate that and pull out not just, I suppose, if you like, the official formal language of healthcare, but actually also to pick up the jargons, the acronyms which clinicians and doctors are actually using in their everyday practice. And then wrap all of that as a layer around UMLS to ultimately create the thing that we called Emmett. And at its heart, it's got in excess of about 250,000 what we call core clinical concepts, but in total, some 1 million concepts in total, well, more than 1 million concepts actually in Emmett as a whole. And if I just to show you an example of what this looks like, I would imagine for this audience, this probably looks very familiar stuff, but basically what you can see we have here is on the left-hand side of the slide. We're just looking at a part of the entry in Emmett for breast cancer, which is, what the average person on the street would describe that condition. But obviously that's going to sit within the taxonomy, so it's got all sorts of parent terms like the broader collection of breast disorders, but it also has more precise terms like breast sarcoma and so on. And in building this up, we've drawn on standardized vocabularies such as, well, originally ICD-9, and then as Marjorie alluded to, a large piece of work then last year to bring ICD-10 into this as well. Also mesh headings and the SNOMED codes and many other coding systems as well. And that basically meant we were able to bring a view of breast cancer together within the disease branch of Emmett. And then, of course, it's not just taxonomy, it also maintains relationships with other related terms, so it has ontological aspects as well. So if you look on the right-hand side, then you can see associated with breast cancer, there are certain synonyms, there are certain standardized treatments, be they drugs, be they procedures, but we can also look at things like risk factors and key clinical findings. So that was basically how we went about building up Emmett. And having created that taxonomy, what it basically meant we were then able to do was to take that very, very large collection of structured XML, which we already had. It was estimated we had something of the order of 20 million individual pieces of content structured in XML. So we already knew this is an abstract, this is a table, this is an image. But then by transforming that into what we call smart content, by applying that layer of semantic meaning, we were now easily able to tell this is a title, an abstract, an image, about breast cancer or whatever the clinical concept was. And there are many ways in which this has been deployed in the creation of clinical key, and this is just one very simple example. The obvious one, if you like, of course, is for the user search experience. They're going in, they're typing in their search terms, and if you imagine for most doctors, they're all big fans of Google, they're not necessarily information professionals, so they are looking for the Google-like search experience, so getting the auto-suggest is what they're used to and what they expect. But I think the powerful thing here, of course, is that auto-suggest is being driven by a highly structured and codified medical taxonomy. So it's basically, it's all good stuff that's been suggested back to the end user. So at that point, they have the choice of selecting some of the terms which have been auto-suggested here, or if for whatever reason they've got a precise phrase in their own mind, they can go ahead and just search on that. That will still run against all the concepts that have been indexed within the content underpinning clinical key. But if for any reason they've put in something so super specific, it's not readily identifiable within that concept map within Emmett and within the tagging within clinical key, it's still possible to interrogate the full text of everything under the covers. So that's a really super fast overview of how we went about developing clinical key. And if we had more time, I could go in and show you how we have applied then that same semantic enrichment to enable things like faceted searching and some of the things that Marjorie alluded to earlier. But what I thought in the remaining few minutes it would be interesting to show you is how then that same technology and specifically the Emmett taxonomy has actually now is in the process of being deployed by another part of the business. So this is actually my colleagues across in the STM journals group within Elsevier, and specifically the group responsible for the 500-odd health and medical life sciences journals that we have. And basically, what they have done, earlier this year they announced a very significant upgrade to the web platform where we are hosting those journals, and in particular we're talking, sorry, I hit the button too soon. We're talking about those publication-specific customized sites which are typically serving large personal and society member audiences. And generally they would be largely, although not necessarily exclusively, clinical practitioners. So we are talking about things like the Lancet.com would probably be the most recognizable name for many people. And a big driver for that, of course, for the team in the journals group, of course, was they were listening to what they were hearing from the journal editors. And obviously it's incredibly important for them that they're going to make their articles more discoverable and just more usefully organized within these online implementations. So in this example, it's from the Journal of Fertility and Sterility. And what you can basically see here, the auto-suggest is essentially going to work in almost exactly the same way as clinical key. So again, the user, they put in their search term. Because behind the scenes everything has been indexed and tagged using the Emmett taxonomy, again, the website can now auto-suggest those very precise clinical terms. And ultimately, the end goal that we want to get to is getting people to the most clinically relevant answer as quickly as possible. But if we move on to another aspect of this, and I must admit, when I learned about this, in some ways I thought this is perhaps even more interesting. Because, my goodness, there's something very sensitive on the laptop up here, so I'll just go back again. I don't know what I'm touching to make things move so quickly. The new website also has a significant enhancements to the toolkit provided for the editors in terms of the content management. Now this is actually powered by the Atipon Literatum service and then combined with the Emmett taxonomy. And basically what it means is, an example that you can see here, and this is using the gastroenterology journal as an example, it's basically providing the journal editors with a very easy kind of self-service interface where they can very easily create topic collections around whatever is a clinical topic or whatever the topic of relevance is for them and for their users. And essentially you can see they can, in this example, somebody is choosing the clinical area is around colitis. It's in the gastroenterology journal. And then if you look down at the bottom of the slide, you can then see how then that presents on the journal website as a clinically focused topical area. So there's kind of two obvious benefits to that. This is the sort of thing that journal editors quite often have traditionally done, possibly in quite a manual way. So, of course, there's a big benefit that the more we can do through this sort of interface, it just speeds up and makes that process more efficient and effective for the journal editor. And then, of course, it means from the end user perspective, they're getting presented with ways of making the content be more discoverable for them, but it's also presenting different type of navigation pathways as well. And if I'm just actually going to quote from my colleagues in that side of the business, because in looking to the future, what they can see as well is that some of the really exciting things about this is that it's not just the day-to-day management of the journal website. Of course, it means that where there might be very time-specific events, so be it like a conference in this field, if the journal editor wants to very quickly create a curated collection around the topics being covered by that conference, they can do so. For the societies whose journals are being presented on these websites, there's also potential there to help boost the ranking of those journals by promoting the topical content that's particularly highly searched for. And even if they're interested in going for kind of sponsored access models, they can create collections around that as well. So I think that's a very interesting area in that, if you like, in the journals part of the business, this sort of editorial tool is meeting the particular needs of the journal editors, who, of course, have day jobs as well. If you were looking at the clinical key environment, we have an awful lot of internal staff who are using similar sort of tools, but perhaps presented and working in a slightly different way. So it's interesting there where we're looking at the same core technology is delivering similar outcomes, but it's been presented and used in slightly different ways depending on the audiences that are using it. And finally, just to give you a quick walkthrough how all this works. So this is an illustration of the workflow for the journal branded solutions. I could have... Let me go back again. I'm stepping away from this machine now. If I was presenting to you the clinical key workflow, it would actually look almost identical to this. Starting from the left-hand side, obviously you've got the source content, which is then normalized and structured. We have then that all goes through a rules engine followed by cloud-based automated indexing to create both that concept index and the full text indexed. And then on the search side, depending on the product implementation, there are what we would term various boosting rules depending upon the application and what's the content that's most important to deliver highest up in the search results. And then finally, you can see on the right-hand side here, specifically for the journal branded solutions, we have what's now called the Smart Collection tool. And hence, this is how we're going from smart content to smart collections, and we hope meeting effectively a broad range of user needs. I hope you found that interesting, and happy to take questions later on.